According to the United Nations Children Fund, 1 in 3 children is out of school in Nigeria, which represents about 10.2 million at the primary school level and about 8.1 million children at the junior secondary level. Issues such as high insecurity, low education funding, poorly resourced schools, low teacher competency level, and high pupil-teacher ratios have deprived many children of quality education in the country. As education plays a crucial role in the development of any country, UNICEF advocates for a renewed commitment to ensure that no child is left behind. Well, joining us via Zoom from the United Kingdom for this conversation is Ronke Adiabo. She is the CEO and founder of the IA Foundation. Good morning and thank you for joining us on TVC Breakfast.
Good morning and thanks for having me.
All right. So a UNICEF report earlier this year says we have about 18 million children out of school. That's about the size of Chad. What exactly are we not doing right?
Okay, so basically, actually, this trajectory is now going in the right direction, I'm afraid to say. 2 years ago, it was 20.2 million. So it's dropped now to 18.3 million. So that's good news. Now, this government came in with the right political will to deal with this problem. The budget for education was increased by 25%. So these are all good. But these are too little, too late. Especially in the north, we've got some very serious challenges. Because in my opinion, the elites in the north have actually abdicated their responsibility to educate their citizens. And this is now coming back to bite us. Just last week when we had the protest, in the north, there were more young children protesting, between 5 to 10, carrying placards, right? Because these children are out of school anyway. In Kano, when they went to the National Library, they stole everything from the National Library, but they left the books. What does that tell you about the mindset of our people? So as a country, we've abdicated our responsibility in educating our citizens, and that's not good enough. But this is the time to fix it. So everyone needs to be hands on deck. The government needs to take this seriously. The state government needs to take this seriously. Local government needs to take it seriously. Every citizen needs to take this seriously. Because if you don't deal with this, it's a ticking time bomb. And it will come back to affect every one of us if we don't deal with it correctly.
All right, and when you say that, this figure has significantly reduced, this means that to some extent, some of the policies put in place may have worked. Or is that what you're saying? Are you saying that the policies and programs put in place are really not enough to tackle the situation?
Basically, all I'm saying is that in terms of the statistics, it's going down. But it's too little, too late. What business have we got having 18.3 million children on the streets not going to school? And we are all looking away as if it's not our business. The government of the day is not taking it as seriously as we expect them to. Without a doubt, as I said, this regime is taking it seriously. Because under this regime, the Commission for Almajiria and Out-of-School Children has been set up, right? So if I was the president, I will make the issue of out-of-school children issue a standing agenda item at our weekly Wednesday NEC meeting, so that the NEC can monitor the trajectory. It needs to take this personal. The way the new administration came in and introduced the student loan, the same way they should pay attention to the number of out-of-school children and make sure they put mechanisms in place to proactively drop these numbers. That number is too high. We're the highest in the world. 15% of the total out-of-school children in the world are in Nigeria. Regionally, 33% are in Nigeria. So how did we find ourselves in this situation? But there's no point looking back in anger. We need to look forward now positively. For me, last year in October 2023, in the House, they passed for second reading a bill to penalize parents for not sending their children to school. By now, I expect that to have been signed by the president and for that to become law, because parents are part of the problem. I have personally gone on the streets, picking children up, And parents are struggling with me, saying, no, my child cannot go to school. I'd rather have my children hawk on the street so that they can provide financial resources for the family. That is not what these kids are meant for. So we need to make sure we tackle parents as well to make sure they send their kids to school.
Okay, I was about asking the question about the fact that is it more of a government thing than it is an individual or parental thing to take their child to school. But with this figure, there are many people who will say that 18.3 million is quite alarming and question the statistics in which the United Nations used in arriving at this alarming figure. Would you think in that direction as well?
It's unfortunate that we as a country, we don't have our own methodology of accounting for the number of out-of-school children. Therefore, we are sort of relying on the data which UNICEF is giving us. Now, UNICEF is an international organization with reputation, so I have no issues relying on the figures they've given us. If Nigeria government can give us their own figures, that's fine, but I can't see any figures coming out from the Nigerian government. So we have no choice but to rely on UNICEF, which again, as I said, is not good enough. The president needs to hold the Minister of Education accountable to produce these numbers. And again, in terms of how to make sure they have accurate data, we've got a brilliant, very digital savvy, digital economy minister. He should be involved to make sure we can capture this data and to make sure we can monitor it. Because if you don't have a good mechanism for capturing the data, there's no way you're going to monitor it. And this needs to start from birth. When the kids are born, they should make it law that every parent must register their child, right? And if you don't register your child, there's a penalty for that. So if a child is registered at birth, the government has captured the data about that child. So when it's time for school age and that child does not turn up at the school, then the authority will go after such parents. But if that is not in place, how do we know how many children we have for us to be able to account for them and know whether they're in school or they're not in school? So data, being digitally savvy about this issue, is one of the ways in which the government can tackle the problem.
All right, sorry, but in all of this now, you mentioned earlier about the government fixing it. If you drive around Lagos, you see children hawking on the road and all of that. Children that are supposed to be in school, and not just Lagos, but in other states as well, which UNICEF mentioned, Bauchi and others. What can be done? How do we fix this situation?
Right. So, as I mentioned earlier, parents are part of the problem. We must penalize parents who don't send the kids to school. You can't penalize the child. You need to penalize the parent. Now, we need to also try in terms of social investment. So with regards to our social cash transfer, because poverty is part of the problem. The reason the parents don't send their kids to school is because of poverty. So if we are trying to mitigate the poverty issue, maybe parents will be convinced to send their children to school. Also, insecurity is a big factor. If we can try to secure the country, that would give parents more confidence as well to send their kids to school. In the last 10 years, 1,680 children have been abducted. Any parent looking at that number will not be convinced to send their kids to school because they don't want their kids abducted. Also, over 180 children, out-of-school children, have been killed because it's a matter of safety. If you're in school, it's a safe area for you. But if the kids are roaming the street, the kids are unsafe. Therefore, 180 of them have been killed. So it's important that the government takes this seriously. And the problem needs to be localized. The state government needs to take responsibility for the number of the out-of-school children. The state with the highest number of out-of-school children should be named and shamed. And we need to know what that state governor wants to do about it. The local government as well needs to be highly involved in this. And also, we need to start addressing cultural issues, especially in the north, whereby girls are married off very quickly. No one is saying they should marry their daughters, but let them attain a good level of education, up to SSS 3. Then you can marry them off. But you can't just marry girls off without education, because it will even affect the children they are going to bring into the world. Because if the mothers are not educated, they won't see education as important enough for their children as well to be educated. So it's important that we all take responsibility for this. And as I said, when I say localizing the problem, people tend to listen to their pastors, their imams, and their traditional rulers than even the government. So we need to engage traditional rulers, we need to engage the imams and the pastors to actually take responsibility as well to make sure their congregation are educating their children and to make sure they are preaching it on the pulpit and in the mosque that, look, your child must go to school.
I mean, there's really no need crying over spilled milk, like you said earlier. But, you know, some would argue that in terms of our budgeting or our funding for education yearly, it seems that we are not ready. Our funding falls around 7 to 8%, as against UNESCO's recommendation of about 15 to 20%. What would be the appropriate budget for education every year?
Ideally, I would expect any responsible government to spend 15% of their total budget on education. Because this is about your workforce. This is about skilling your population to make sure you have the right skill to power your economy. Therefore, you need to put your money where your mouth is. You need to invest in ensuring that you have the right level of skills to power your economy. So I would encourage the government of the day to double up on the budget for education. I know they've increased it by 25%, but because we are starting from a very low base, the 25% have no significance. Because if you look at it, we say we've got 18.3 million out-of-school children. If peradventure today, those 18.3 million children decide to go to school, we don't have enough educational infrastructure to accommodate them. We don't have enough classes, we don't have enough teachers, we don't have enough teaching resources to accommodate those children. So therefore, funding within the education sector needs to be increased.
Okay, so you mentioned earlier about not having enough funding, not having enough teachers. Now, we are in a situation or in circumstances where young people don't want to learn education in the university, don't want to study teaching and all of that. Does that contribute to this alarming rate of out-of-school children?
Yeah, I mean, just listening to the news this morning, we understand they've increased the salary for judges. What I'd love to hear as well is that the government has increased the salary for teachers. They must make teaching very attractive for people to want to go into teaching. From the data we are looking at, about 50% of basic educational teachers do not have the NCE qualification. So if the teachers are not equipped and they are going to class to teach these children at basic educational level, it's a case of garbage in, garbage out. They would just be teaching the children what they know, which is not adequate because they are not qualified to be able to teach those children. Government must make it mandatory that as a bare minimum, anyone who wants to teach must have the NCE qualification. And they need to invest in the teachers. They need to pay for these teachers to go and get that qualification. Also, apart from the qualification, 10% of teachers are absent from school. Maybe they are doing other things because, again, their salary is not enough to sustain them. So they are absent from work, from their teaching work, doing other things that will generate money for them. So what I'd love to hear is a 300% increase in teachers' wages to attract more people to come into the teaching profession.
And the First Lady has been at the fore of this conversation on education, especially for the girl child. But some would also argue that the curriculum that we have currently in Nigeria is not one that can stand side by side with other climes. In this out-of-school children conversation, there are those who do not even visit the school walls. There are those who go to school but do not even further their education. But at this point, when you look at what is being taught in the school, does it really reflect the reality of what education to be today?
Yes and no. I believe Nigeria is a bit behind the curve when it comes to the curriculum. Curriculum should not be a static issue. It should be evolving. Because as you know, things change every day. Change is the only constant in this world. Other climes are moving with time. Things are being digitized now. In the educational sector internationally, the area that is moving fastly is providing educational digital devices for students in the classroom. I don't think we are there yet in Nigeria. By now, we must have a situation where an average child has got a digital device in the classroom. We need to have whiteboards in the classroom. We need to move with time. But because there's not enough money being channeled into education, we are sort of obsolete in terms of the utilities we're using to teach these children. So it's important that we pump in more money to modernize the way we impact education and to make sure our kids can move with time and can compete favorably in the international stage. I mean, I live in the UK. I was educated in Nigeria, but I can compare favorably with my contemporaries in the UK because then education in Nigeria was good and was high standard. We can't say the same for students at this point in time. So government needs to pay attention to this. Otherwise, we would not have a good workforce in the future, and we know what that will do to the economy.
Yes, everyone knows what that could do in the economy, but we're also in a situation whereby there are many people who just want their kids in private schools, believing that those schools offer the best with high tuition. What about public schools? I know that in the past, some people have said that public education back then was a big deal, and many of our leaders attended public schools and got the best. But now many are running away from public schools. How can the government revamp public education such that it can be free for everyone?
Okay, good question. I think the first thing to do is to ensure that if you want to vie for public office, one of the criteria is that your child should be in public school. Because in my opinion, if you do that, the legislators, the executive, will prioritize our state education. They will make sure they pump more money because they know their children are attending it. We will see a whole change if they put that in place. That is part of the criteria, right? And also, as we know, because of the reduction in the money that has been pumped into education, the quality of state education has dropped drastically. So if the government puts in more money, that will enable it, to increase the value, because it's about value proposition. If the schools are not offering good value, then parents will not want to send their kids to school. As you know, I run a foundation that we pick up out of school children. Most of the children we pick up, we put them in state schools, and they are doing very well. So especially in Lagos State, their state schools are very, very good. I want to encourage other state governments as well to pump more money into education. Now, I also want to speak to the state governors because, as we know, the way we fund education in Nigeria is a tripartite arrangement. So it's between the state government, it's between the local government and the federal government. But there needs to be counterpart funding. Right? So the state government needs to make sure they put their own money on the table, apart from the one the government is putting on the table. Because I must say, most state governors in Nigeria are not putting their own counterpart funding on the table. And that is affecting the volume of money that is going into education and the quality of education.
And, just before we let you go, talk to us about what, the long-term implication of an increasing number of out-of-school children, what implication it will have on economic development, social development, and also, our relationship with other nations.
Okay, so the first thing is that it's a ticking time bomb. And we've just seen a taste of we've just seen a taste of it when we had the protest last week, where you see 5 to 10 year olds carrying placards that they don't even know what is on that placard, right? So potentially you've got uneducated citizens in your hand. And that potentially can be explosive. And no government, no responsible government should feel comfortable having 18.3 million on the street, because these are going to be unrestive children, and they could potentially, affect the government. They might be protesting where they're not supposed to protest, because it's what you tell them to do that they will do. So in my opinion, it's important that the government prioritizes that. Also, if you don't educate your workforce, that is the quality of skills that you will get. That is the quality of manpower that you will get. So therefore, the quality of the doctors, the nurses, will not be as good as international standards. And you might not even have the doctors and the nurses and the accountants and the lawyers, because they are not being educated. We are lucky now that we are benefiting from those who were educated in the past. We as leaders now are now failing the next generation. We are failing to empower them with the right skills to power the economy. Therefore, in future, we are going to suffer for it. We will get to a stage like the UK, where you will have to be importing skilled workforce to come and power your economy. We don't want to get to that situation. Nigeria is lucky that we've got a huge population, over 200 million. We have no business importing skills from abroad. We need to equip our own citizens to make sure they can power the economy. Also, the insecurity challenges we are experiencing now is because we did not educate our citizens. Because those children we did not educate in those days have no skills now. They are not economically active. They have nothing to fall back on other than insecurity. And that's why the level of insecurity in Nigeria has increased. So if we want to tackle insecurity, we want to tackle poverty, we want to tackle woman power development, we need to educate our citizens at a high level and a high standard of international standard.
All right, we're also at a time where, more attention has been focused on the service industry. Let's look at the mental capacity of Nigerians or even these children in the first place. Some persons may not want to go to the four walls of the school, but perhaps we want to, explore the vocational education, skill and all that. Is this something that is relative in this situation?
Right. Again, as I said, we pick up kids from the school, from the streets. And when we pick them up, we need to assess them medically to see how they are, to see their state of mind, because most of these children have been abused, right? Safeguarding needs to be taken seriously in Nigeria to make sure we safeguard these kids, to make sure we safeguard their mental ability, and to make sure they are also motivated to want to go to school. Some kids don't want to go to school because they've been exposed to hawking, they've been exposed to making money, and that is what they know, and that's what they want to do. They just want to make money. Yes, you want to make money, but you need the education. Because if you want to make money, you need to be able to add up. You need to know your mathematics. You need to have literacy skills. So it's important that whatever you want to do in life, the bare foundation is to get basic education to make sure you can thrive in life. Now, the other area I would like to talk about is, apart from the academic route, there is the vocational route as well. Because as you know, we need our plumbers, we need our carpenters. So it's important that the government encourage people as well to go down the vocational route, because not everyone is academically inclined. Yeah. But once they have the basic education up to GSS 3, which is compulsory anyway, then they could branch sideways into the vocational route and make sure they equip themselves. The whole idea is to make sure everyone has skill sets to be able to be economically active, and to be able to sustain themselves and their family, and not rely on the dubious means to make money for themselves and to actually have the right amount of money to sustain themselves and their families.
All right, that's a fine place to leave the conversation for today. Ronke